Greetings and salutations. Thank you for clicking on the video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a swap file for your Linux installation. It is very early in the morning. It's about 4 o'clock, so I have to be kind of quiet. I don't want to wake anybody up. Hopefully, you guys can hear me okay. If you need to, turn it up a little bit. I'm doing this video because in the last video I posted about my experiences with XFS, I mentioned that when I reloaded the system that I used Jeremy O'Connell's method of setting up a Linux system where instead of using a swap partition, he likes to use a swap file. Jeremy O'Connell, of course, is Mr. Server of Mr. Server and Mr. Desktop fame. Actually, it's Mr. Desktop and Mr. Server. And you guys might have seen couple of those shows that we put up. Anyway, several folks came back to me and said they'd like to see how this is done. Now, the method I'm going to show you works in Ubuntu, and it works in anything based on Ubuntu, like Linux Mint. Also, this would work for Debian, and it works for Arch as well. But if you're going to be doing this on any other distribution, I would strongly suggest that you look up documentation on how to do it, just in case there's any differences. And also keep in mind here that this is very advanced Linux. This is administrator stuff we're going to do, and we're going to be editing the fstab file, which is always a dicey proposition because if you corrupt that file in any way, even one character being different than what's supposed to be there, you may end up with a system that won't boot. So proceed with extreme caution and at your own risk. There are several reasons why you might want to do this. You might want to create a Linux installation where everything was in one file system in one partition, setting up some sort of dual boot arrangement, or maybe you just want to create a partition where you are going to clone that and then resize it and move it elsewhere. Also, you may have used the automatic installer partitioner that when you just choose to erase and install. What that does is it creates a swap file that is just a little bit larger than the amount of installed memory that you have in the machine. Well, if you upgrade the memory, you may want to add swap space so that you may hibernate and sleep properly. Whatever reason you want to do it, I'm going to show you how. And in today's example, I have a virtual machine spun up over here on the right hand side of the screen, and we're going to add swap space to it. If you were going to start from scratch, you had no swap partition allocated, then you would just create the swap file and you do the same steps basically that we're going to do here, but you don't have to deal with turning swap off because swap's not running. Alright, so let's just jump into it. I got some commands here. I'm going to try and post these in the description if YouTube will let me, because sometimes it doesn't take code, but I don't see any characters in here they don't like, so hopefully this will post. So the first thing that we're going to have to do in our machine is stat swap, which means we're going to have to figure out what's actually going on with swap. If, like I said, if there's no swap installed, you can skip this part, but we want to make sure that swap is working and that there's not any problems with it. So the first command that we're going to use, there's actually two of them that you can use to verify this here. I'm going to use this one, and I want to copy this. And yes, I'm going to do the old menu method, because if I just like center click to paste this, then it has a tendency to execute the command, and I want to do it one by one here. Alright, put my password in. Okay, so it is showing that swap is enabled, and shows us a size there, and it also shows us that it's on a partition and how much is used, although it's wrapping around so it's a little hard to see. Another thing that we can do is just do free H, and now this will show us the swap down here at the bottom, and it's 1 gigabyte of swap, and 35 megabytes of swap is used at this point. So you get the idea. Yes, there's swap on this machine, it's on the partition. But let's say I want to make that swap bigger. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and just turn swap off. That way we won't. This avoids the possibility of having some sort of swap conflict happen somewhere along the way. We don't want that. So let me paste this in here. Can't see my cursor. There it is. Okay. Paste. Okay, so now what this command is going to do is it's going to turn all of the swap on the system off, and it is going to give us some output. So that's what the arguments there are. A is all, and V is just tell me what you're doing. Okay, swap is now off. And then we can create a swap file. We'll use this command right here to do that. And in my example here, I have 4 gigabytes, but I'm going to change that for this virtual machine because I think I'm going to make a 2 gigabyte swap file. So just paste that in like this. Now, the reason why we are using this fallocate command to create the file is because if we would use just like the touch command to make a file, it would just create an empty file. We have to actually tell the system how much space we need for this file right up front without putting anything in it so that it gets allocated properly. So then we can verify that the file was created. And we want to use the arguments A and L and H. And we will just put this in like this. Yep, see? One of these days I'm going to do a video and not do any typos. It's going to be awesome. Okay, so our video, or rather our file is in there. That's cool. Let's go ahead and clear the screen. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is secure this file because right now, as it has been created, it is just this wide open file that anybody can look at and read and stuff like that. Well, that's a security risk because swap does contain information that if a hacker got into your system or a very smart user on your system who knew how to actually gain useful information from a swap file, they might be able to get into it. So we're going to secure that file by making it readable and writable only to the root user. So that's what that does. And then we can confirm that by looking at the permissions here, and you see now that the only person that can read and write to it is root, and that's exactly what we want to have going on. Alright. So the next thing we want to do is format the swap space in the file. We need to have the system create a swap file system in that file, and that's what this command is going to do. So let us copy and paste yet again. And it just went ahead and did it. It took my paste as the command itself. So we get this confirmation here that says that setting up swap space version 1 gives us a size, and it also gives us a UUID. Now, what you could do with that UUID is you could use that in the fstab later. But we're going to use a little bit of an easier method, and there's a reason why. I'll explain that as we roll along. So if you're familiar with using UUIDs, I don't suggest that you actually use this one in this case. Okay, so now the next thing that we have to do is turn swap on. Because we have our file and it is created and allocated and all that good stuff. So we'll paste that in, and it did it, I think. So we're going to verify that it's working. So we're just going to use this. Okay. And now you see that we have swap on, and the type is a file, and it shows us that there's 2 gigabytes of space here, and we're not using any of it right now, but it is working. So great, we did that. And you can also verify that by just doing free -m. Oop, do it over here. Free -m. Okay. So now it shows, yes, we have 2 gigabytes of swap, and we have none of it being used. So that's cool. Okay, so what we need to do now is make this permanent, because right now we have a swap file, but the system, the next time it boots up, it's not going to know it's there. It's not going to mount it up. So we want to do that. So let me clear the screen. There we go. Okay, so we're going to clear the screen. What we want to do is we're going to edit the fstab file. If you are not used to working with fstab, then what you could do here is to create a copy first. And that would be the cp command fstab, and maybe you could rename the new one fstab old, or the copy rather, and that way if you screwed something up and it didn't work, you could restore the original. So just a thought. I've had people who said, well, it's always a good idea to copy configuration files before you modify them. Yes, that's true, but if you trash fstab, it's not going to matter much unless you know how to work at a recovery console. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to add a line of text here. And I'm going to move this so I can move this down here where I can see the whole thing, because I have this virtual machine to always stay up front. So we need everything within here in these quotes. Now you may be saying, well, look, everything else is mounted with a UUID. Why are we not mounting this with a UUID? Why are we going to use a file name call here to do this? Well, the reason is very simple. What if you want to change the size of the file later? This is flexible. So let's say that you start out and you create a 2 gigabyte file, but for some reason or other you decide you don't need all that extra space and you want to make a smaller file. Well, you can go back through this process and you can delete that file and create a new one of a different size, or add a file to the system. You could have another file. And this keeps it very flexible. So we have added that syntax down there. So we're telling the system that we have please connect a swap file, and it is a swap using swap rules and all that stuff, and that's what that tells the system. So let's write that out. Yes, write out fstab. Go ahead and get out of nano. And then we're going to confirm that this is working properly by rebooting the machine. Okay. Type these commands all the time when I'm not recording. No problem. Doing a video and trying to think and type at the same time, that's an entirely different story. Okay, so we'll just let this get itself booted up. And it is a virtual machine, so the boot time's a little slower. I'm also capturing video. That's pretty quick, actually. Here comes. Alright, so let me log in. We didn't get any errors saying that it couldn't mount the file system, so we know we didn't trash the fstab tab file too much in all of this messing around. And there's a desktop. That's a nice thing to see. All right, let's get us a terminal over here. All right, so we want to, first of all, we want to stat fs. We want to, or stat the swap file. What was I talking about? I don't know. What did he say? Is he drunk? I don't know. Okay. All right, now you see that we have the swap partition there, and we also have a swap file. So let's see how much total swap space we have. Well, we got 3 gigabytes of swap space. So now you're beginning to see how flexible this can be. So if you need to add swap for any reason, you don't have to reinstall. You don't have to open up gparted and resize your partitions. Just add a swap file. And like I said, you could also install the system with no swap file. Just when you do the installation, you just don't select a swap. You do not create a swap partition. Do manual. And then you can use the entire partition space you want for ext4. And then, of course, it's going to complain when you do that because it doesn't like to install that way at all. Makes it angry. So it's going to throw up a couple of messages that's saying, hey, you didn't allocate any swap. But the installation should work just fine. Just make sure that the first thing you do when you boot the system for the first time is create a swap file so it has some place to work. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care if you've got 32 gigabytes of memory in your machine. You got to have some swap space somewhere. The Linux operating system needs swap space, even if it hardly ever uses it. Some programs that run on Linux require the swap space as well. They get direct access to it. So running a system without swap is never a good idea. And that's true with any operating system, whether that be Linux or Windows or whatever. Make sure that you always have a page file or a swap file in the system somewhere so it has some virtual memory. Because if an application takes off and goes crazy and starts sucking up the physical memory and it doesn't have some place to start dumping those extra pages, before it can give you a warning that it's running low on memory, the system may just lock up entirely without any swap space at all. So thank you for watching the video. I sure do appreciate it. Do check out freedompenguin.com. I got a new article up there that was just published earlier today, as a matter of fact, or yesterday rather. It's already Sunday, isn't it? And also check out Easy Linux on the web. Check out Easy Linux on Facebook. And if you do, please give it a like. And of course, I love to hear your comments and suggestions. So thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.